Welcome, one and all, live to the Jim Masters Show, live entertainment, lifestyle, celebrity talk show series. I'm your host, Jim Masters. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're coming at you here in the United States on the East Coast and the New York area with great entertainment, great conversations, interactivity with our live viewers who are watching from around the world, and you as well. Thanks so much for making us a part of your day. We love having you here and try to give you the best in content and entertainment, laughs, inspiration, and all kinds of cool stuff with our broadcast series, The Jim Masters Show Live. And I'm so honored to have a multi-Emmy winning television legend, the father, the founder, the creator of reality TV on television with the beloved series Real People. Who didn't watch this? This was appointment viewing on NBC for the longest time. Yeah, Sarah Purcell and Byron Allen, and of course our very special guest who you see there. We have John Barbour here. He is a broadcaster through and through. He loves the industry. He's lived the industry, breathed the industry, and has helped create the industry as well. Not just Real People, that beloved series, but so much more epic television. And also he's got some other really special things to share with us involving Kennedy, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the president, and a lot of other great things. He's, again, a real class act. He's somebody that is, he's very affable, congenial. He's a comedian. He's an actor. He's an author. I'll show you in just a second his phenomenal memoir, which has a terrific title that is certainly a attention grabber. In addition to Real People, which he created and he was a host of as well. You've seen him on a lot of great television over the years. Here's an actual TV guide we dug up with the gang right there. You see everybody there, Skip and Sarah, everybody's on there, and John at the top. He also hosted for a time The Gong Show. Yeah, you may remember that. There was a period where he hosted that as well. And again, here's a great shot we dug up with Red Fox. Isn't that really cool? We'll talk about that and so much more. He has a phenomenal, this is what his studio home office looks like. And you're going to see it in just a second live because he's actually in it. Big Superman aficionado and so much more. He's actually, you probably think maybe he's in New York, right? Or Los Angeles. He's actually in Las Vegas, Nevada. And he just told me that like a week ago, it was hotter. It was better to be inside than out. Yes, but the heat was so extraordinary. Everything melted. And so we're glad that, he came back together for us here. He melted and he's back together to join us on this really epic episode. Again, from Real People to so much more. There was no reality television prior to the creation of Real People on NBC. Thought of the idea, created a team, got other fellow hosts, and put it together. And it was really, really cool. You may remember, everyday people being spotlighted, quirky, interesting, funky. It was really, really terrific. We, of course, always watched it. And every episode was something unique, something different, usually something remarkable and funny. Really absolutely fantastic. That literally, gang, is just the short list. Before he became the multi-Emmy winning godfather of reality TV by creating Real People, John worked as a writer for Frank Sinatra. Now, you may remember we just had the co-owner and executive chef of Patsy's Italian restaurant, good friend of mine, Sal, in New York City, Frank Sinatra's favorite Italian restaurant in New York. So I don't doubt that John has been to Patsy's. He worked as a writer for Frank Sinatra, interviewed lots of incredible guests, some of them controversial as well. He's interviewed Muhammad Ali, Cesar Chavez, President Ronald Reagan, Jane Fonda for his own award-winning program as well. And he has also worked with comic legends such as Lenny Bruce, the incomparable Rodney Dangerfield, one of my favorites, George Carlin, another favorite, Johnny Carson. We were just talking about Johnny Carson, Bob Hope, he's worked with George Burns as well as shared the stage with Tim Conway, one of our favorites. Love Tim Conway. And we had his daughter, Kelly, on the show talking about growing up Conway, which was really amazing. He worked with Tim Conway and Knuckles and Nash in Las Vegas. And from, believe it or not, you wouldn't think, with the illustrious background, literally from high school dropout to becoming the man who changed the face of American television, John Barbour is recognized as a TV legend who won the first of his 5 Emmys as the original host of AM LA, and of course, Los Angeles, where he interviewed some of the most recognizable names in the world. And he was the first in America to do film reviews on the actual evening newscasts, which is something that you didn't really see before. He's a trendsetter and a go-getter and a groundbreaker on so many different levels in the industry. He won 3 more consecutive Emmys for KNBC's Critics at Large. You may remember just a couple of weeks ago, we had the legendary Fritz Coleman, legendary meteorologist from KNBC, on our show, who's also a comedian. You see that episode. John spent 10 years as a critic at the Los Angeles magazines. He wrote and directed the award-winning The Garrison Tapes, which director Oliver Stone heralded as the perfect companion piece to his movie, JFK. And in 2017, he wrote and directed Part 2, The American Media and the Second Assassination of President John F. Kennedy, which was applauded as the definitive film on JFK and the rise of fake news. And in his highly entertaining, hysterically funny, deeply informative, best-selling autobiography, Your Mother's Not a Virgin, readers discovered what a multifaceted storyteller he is. Again, author, TV legend extraordinaire, comedian, a beloved figure in one of the most competitive, crazy, difficult industries ever. And he survived it and lives to tell. He's also an inspirational speaker, mentor, motivational speaker on many levels as well, which I think is a really cool thing. He's mentored others along the way in this industry, up and coming. I can go on. Working in this industry for me personally, it's a real honor to have him here. He's a very busy guy, and to take a few minutes, maybe a little bit longer than a few minutes. Nothing on the Jim Masters show is a few minutes, as you guys know. But to stop by our show and really spend some time with us, we're going to have a great, great time. I want to show you the book. We have it here, so you can, get it as well. There you go. Your Mother's Not a Virgin. And we'll talk about that in just a second. He's got so many great stories to share, and we're going to share that starting right now. If you'd like to comment, boy, I see a lot of comments in the Lovely Hole chat room. That is awesome. Keep the comments coming in. Want to comment in the chat room? Certainly do that when you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe anyway. Here he is, all decked out in his shrine of everything entertainment and media, the one and only, the iconic John Barbour on the Jim Masters Show live. John, my friend, welcome to the Jim Masters Show. Honor and a pleasure.
Jim, I must tell you, that is by far the most wonderfully produced piece I have ever seen in either contemporary television or contemporary internet. And I feel like I've been put in a pine box and I'm going down and you're giving me eulogy. So play this when they're putting me in that pine box. And we should mention, you were talking about how hot it was. We chatted before we came on the air, and I was hoping that you would record it because you are so interesting, even about your own background. But for 7 or 8 weeks in Las Vegas, first of all, I would have to cut back to be a golf junkie. Every afternoon I'd go out and play 9 holes at Boulder Creek. But for 8 weeks, I couldn't do that because it never got less than 115 degrees here. And I wrote a couple of jokes about it because people would ask me, John, how hot is it in Vegas? And one of them was, if my house caught on fire, I'd be safer running inside. And the second one was that it got so hot that at McCarran Airport, one of the landing strips melted and they found Jimmy Hoffa. But I'm totally in awe at how unbelievably professional your research was. And you just did it right off the cuff. I mean, I'm totally impressed. I'm also impressed with the number of jobs I had. I didn't know I was fired that often.
Well, I really thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, with all sincerity, for the kind words, and especially coming from a peer in the industry, somebody who was a trendsetter, somebody who sort of was one of those that I pay homage to, a great respect to, who has paved the way for so many others to do what they do. And as my father, and I mentioned this on this show, and I've mentioned it for years elsewhere, my father, Dad always gives sage advice when you're a kid. So my father, who's also Jim, told me when I was around 7 or 8 years old, John, he said, Jim, or in that case, Jimmy, whenever anybody says something kind or nice to you, always remember this. Always say, thank you very much. Then ask them to please put those words in writing and address it management.
Well, I'll tell you, unfortunately, or maybe even fortunately, I only had a father for 5 years, and he said nothing but everything that was negative to me. And I'll give you an example of that. And I can't explain how some things popped out of me as a child that continued to pop out of me as an adult, and how I ended up earning a living sometimes as a very successful comedian. But I just hated cooked asparagus, and I absolutely would not eat it. Now, I was born in the Salvation Army charity ward to parents who didn't want me. Okay. So I didn't learn this till I was really 6 years of age. But in any event, we were at a dinner table with a plastic, and it was in the kitchen. We didn't have a dining room. It was in the kitchen, plastic. And the four of us, my sister, younger sister, my mother and father, sitting. And I hated asparagus so much. It smelled like socks.
It does. And
my father had to cook because my mother was incapable of anything except drinking. And so he cooked this asparagus, and I refused to eat it. And he said, you will eat it. You will eat it. And I said, I can't, Dad. It tastes horrible. And how could something so horrible just be good for you? He said, I'm telling you it's good for you. And if you don't eat it, you'll find out what is good for you.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I just cannot eat it. He said, you eat it or else. And so I said, Dad, what is else? Well, he moved over and punched me right in the face. Opened the door to the basement and threw me downstairs. And he said, if you don't come upstairs and eat this asparagus, you're going to stay there till summertime. And it was winter in Toronto. We had our basement windows open so they could come to dump the coal in there. And my father and mother fought so severely. My father figured, geez, I'd be better off if I went and fought the Germans, for God's sake. So in 1939, he enlisted in the Canadian Army, went over and fought the Germans, lost half his stomach, got the Order of the British Empire, and never came home. And my mother, who drank, got really bad because to replace my father, she invited uncles who came to the house in bunches like grapes. And they came there to booze with her and to bed with her, and mainly to beat her. And so I was out on the street when I was 6 years of age. And I spent most of my time for 5 cents on Lawler Avenue at the Manor Theater. For 5 cents, I could see a double feature. And I fell in love with Frank Capra movies, especially Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And strangely enough, when we get to it later, that's one of the reasons. Jim Garrison, this sounds like a big leap. Jim Garrison had been an FBI agent. He'd been in the Air Force. He was one of the people who helped liberate Dachau. And in his office, there's one picture only of him sitting by the barbed wire fence. And he said, "Lest we never forget." I mean, it was incredible. So anyway, when he accidentally, he believed the Warren Report until he accidentally met a congressman named Hale Boggs, who was the only dissenting member of the Warren Report. And he was a hunter. And he said to Jim, "I'm telling you, that Oswald kid with that crooked rifle and that crooked sight, he couldn't shoot a dead rabbit, for God's sake." So Hale Boggs went before Congress. You can see in the congressional record, said we need to have a new investigation into the murder of John Kennedy and also the murder of Martin Luther King. And we need to fire J. Edgar Hoover, that pervert. And he called them that in the congressional record. Then about 2 months later, he gets in his private plane to go hunting up in Alaska. And his plane crashes and disappears. They never find the plane or him. And guess who drove him to the airport? Bill Clinton.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, I leaped ahead, but I'm going to tell you, when I came to the United States, between the ages about 13 and 17, I was absolutely a totally addicted gambler. And the reason I was so bad, I mean, I tried to have a paper route when I was a kid because I wanted to be industrious, but I found out I could make more money if I stole. So I ended up anything I could steal or get as a paper route or work a little bit. I lost at these gambling sessions. Now I'm the youngest one there. The oldest one's about 40 and in the military. And I was the first one to lose and the last one to leave. And after about 3 years, I said to myself, Jim, I said, "You know what? I'm not here to make money. I'm here to make friends. But I don't want to be friends with these kind of people. I don't like these kind of people." So I went to the library, which was right across from the police station, which I had to exit a number of times and go to the library, and I got 2 books. Now look at this. After 70 years, for God's sake, or more, I can remember their titles. John Scarnian Dice, John Scarnian Cards. So I memorized them. I realized I didn't have to be in every pot, and any addicted gambler out there should realize they don't have to be in any pot like that. And in a period of 3 months, I won $700. You showed the audience my book. The title came from a conversation with Jim Garrison, by the way. But this is the $60 suit, and I'm wearing a Stetson, and this is in front of the old Flamingo Hotel, Bugsy Siegel's hotel. And so in any event, I decide that I'm going to go to Las Vegas. Here it is now. Again, after 70 years, I'm living in Las Vegas, which was never my destiny. So, and I'm on the train and I'm coming down, and I'm going to tell you the really first cute story about my first deportation. I was deported twice, once when I was 17, once when I was 20. When I was 46, I was unemployable, but I still got my citizenship given to me by the senator from California, John Tunney. And then a year later, by accident, I got Real People on NBC. And a year after that, it was the #1 show in the country. Now, listen, I'm an agnostic, but in my book, I identify 12.5 cases what I can only call divine intervention. I have to be very honest. Things popped out of nowhere like they were gifts from the gods to save Johnny Barber. Anyway, we're coming down to Vegas in the train, and there's an accident about 2 miles in front of us, so they have to stop the train. Now I'm running away from the law in Canada. So, and I'm only 17. So I think, oh my God, the Mounties have called. And they said, stop that train. We got to get Johnny Barber off that train. So I hop off the train. And the only place I can get to is the Cal Neva Lodge. And so the bus takes me to the Cal Neva Lodge. And I'm dressed like that. I go inside. And I'm like a kid walking into an MGM set in Technicolor. I'm looking for Mickey Rooney and I'm looking for Judy Garland. It's beyond unbelievable to me. And so I figured, well, I'll go to the end of the crap table and start playing craps, which I did. And I was doing okay. And people started looking at me. And I thought, oh my God, maybe they can tell I'm only 17 and they'll call the law and I'll be arrested. And then people at the bar started to turn around and look at me. And I thought, oh my God, should I run or not? But everybody stopped what they were doing and they were actually looking behind me. So when I turned around, coming through the big glass doors of the Cal Neva Lodge, arm in arm, not side by side, were Frank Sinatra with a black overcoat draped over his shoulder like an Italian Superman, with Sam Giancana, the mafioso chief of Chicago. Now, how would I, as a 17-year-old, know that? I mean, a week before this, Jim, I was at the movie where Frank Sinatra, it's called As the Clouds Roll By. How can I remember that? And at the end of the film, you might recall Sinatra on a white pedestal in a white tuxedo singing Old Man River, as great as anybody. Now, here he comes walking by us. Everybody stops. Here is the king. And the reason I knew it was Sam Giancana, because it was on the front page of the paper that I was reading that I left on the train. And 25 years later, again by accident, which I hope we get to because it's a terrific story, I become his private writer for 4.5 years. So now, the thing that happened to me, Jim, I was, you can only gamble a couple of hours a day. And there's only one movie theater in Las Vegas at the time. There are only 25,000 people living in Vegas when I came here. Now there are 3.5 million. And so I could only go to a movie once and I'd seen it. But I went to all the shows. I went to see Lily St. Cyr and Joey Brown. And even in this country, it was that unbelievable Edith Piaf. And Old Coward. You could see these magnificent performers.
Yeah.
And I was sitting my game was 21 because you could use one deck then, and I was really doing well. But after about 3 months, I thought to myself, gosh, there's nothing in my soul. I mean, I have this money, but I don't want money. I want a purpose for my life. And as we were chatting about just earlier, my second favorite writer of all time is Mark Twain. Mm-hmm. And Mark Twain said the 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why.
Yeah.
And I found out why I was born when I saw Jack Paar. By far the greatest late night talk show host ever. He was charming, he was witty, and like you, he was a brilliant conversationalist. He just talked to people. I didn't know that people talked to people. I thought they punched them or threw beer cans at them. And I became a comic only because Jack Paar opened his show with a monologue. And and I never wrote any of this stuff down, but I can remember one of his opening lines during an election. He came downstage and he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that I don't vote." And they sort of booed him. And he said, "You know why?" He said, "Only encourages them," which is really a great subtle joke. And I was 30 before I wrote my first joke. And with a couple of years, I ended up on Merv Griffin's show. And when Merv left his show to go to CBS Late Night, which was a terrible mistake for him, he put me under, Westinghouse put me under contract to replace him. I substituted for him one night. My ratings were better than Merv's, but Westinghouse, the head of Westinghouse was a guy named McGowan, and they were negotiating with David Frost, and they used my ratings as a way to get his numbers down. But the reason McGowan preferred Frost over me is because McGowan was always going to England, and David could take him to Buckingham Palace and Downing Street. I could only take him to a comedy club. So anyway, but now, so what happens? I decide that I'm going to leave Las Vegas, and I go to Los Angeles, 17. I get a room in a boarding house at La Brea and Hollywood Boulevard. There are 7 other males, and there's myself. One was a guy named James Kirkwood, who was a very famous silent movie star. And the other was another guy about 28 years of age. Now, at this time in the 50s, they had this horrendous, unconstitutional, anti-free speech movement called McCarthyism and the Cold War. Now, it was, I didn't understand any of that. I'm only 17, okay? And we would sit at the dinner table and we would all chat. And this young man had a thing in his lapel that said, better dead than red. Do you ever remember anything like that?
Yeah, sure.
And
yeah.
I said, my goodness, I said, wouldn't you rather put a rose or a tulip up there?
Right.
And he said, no, it's better to be dead than red. And I said, no, it's not better to be dead for anything.
No.
And the audience starts applauding. And I said, listen, I know nothing about what you're talking about. All I know, if you're still alive, you can change what you don't like. You can't change anything if you're dead. So I think that's nonsense. And then he brought up Roosevelt. And I knew very little about Roosevelt. And he said, you know why God did not blind him? Because Roosevelt's a commie, but he should have blinded him instead of crippling him.
Wow.
And I said, oh my God, what are you saying that for? The reason he didn't blind him, he wanted him to wake up to that god-awful ugly wife of his. I mean, that's the kind of guy he was. So now I said to him, you know, I must tell you, all I know about America and the Depression is that Hoover, a Republican, was the president, okay? And I said, I'm just new here, and I would love to become an actor, so I'm wandering around town. And I see Roosevelt Golf Course. I see Roosevelt Boulevard. I see Roosevelt High School. I see nothing but Roosevelt. And the only thing they named after Hoover is a vacuum cleaner. So people start applauding. He leaves right away. And I know what he's done. He's called the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
So I jump up and I run upstairs and I'm going to jump out the window. And so I can run away from the law again. And 3 or 4 FBI cars stop there and they say, don't jump, Mr. Barber. They call me Mr. Barber. He said, you get back in there. So anyway, and they were very polite. I must tell you that. So the guy comes in and they ask me how long I've been in the United States. And I said, about a year. Well, how long did you get your visa for? And I said, well, I don't have a visa. And they said, did you get in? I said, well, at Niagara Falls, I said, I was just a tourist and I wanted to see the American side of the falls. And I kept going. So where are you going now, Mr. Barber? Is down to FBI headquarters. So they put me in the back of the car, go down to the FBI headquarters, and they fingerprint me, and they interview me for about an hour. How could I be a threat to the American government? So they conclude that I am no threat to the American government. They say this kid is no threat to the American government. So we'll just have to send him back to Toronto, where he is a very big threat to shop owners. So all the cops applauded and laughed, and we're going to turn him over to immigration. So they turned me over to immigration at Terminal Island in San Diego, and that could be a luxury resort. And the guards are not armed, and I'm on the third floor. There are about 50 cots, most of them Hispanics or Mexican. And I am determined I'm not going to stay there, but they won't deport me. And the reason they won't deport me, they don't want to spend money. They wait till they get a dozen and a half. They call them the Canadian geese, and fly them back to Toronto. So they say if you can get $19 for a bus fare, we'll let you go. Now, I hadn't talked to my mother. I deleted my mother. I deleted my father. I deleted my sister. And you want to know something? They were the best examples as parents, which is a horrible thing to say, because I made up my mind. I'm not going to grow up to be a human being like that. Never drank or smoked after that. So in any event, as Lady Macbeth says, screw your courage to the sticking point. And I call sticking point. I call my mother Colette, and I tell her I'm at Terminal Island and they're going to deport me. She starts swearing at me, you bastard, just like your son of a bitch and father. You deserve to be where you are. You're not getting any help from me. And she hung up, and I was convinced the only reason that she answered the phone and took the collect call is that she wanted to insult me. So I decided I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to escape. And I was fortunate enough that the guy next to me took a real liking to me, even though I couldn't speak Spanish whatsoever, but he just loved to chat with me for some reason or other. And I tried to fumble a little bit with Spanish, but I was no good. But I would sort of pantomime some of the stuff that I used to see on Sid Caesar's show. He had a lot of great pantomime, and pantomime does not need words. So they loved me. They just loved me. And I thought, well, he's the guy that takes the old clothes once a week and puts them in a big canvas bag and dumps them down. And I cased this place so well. And I realized if I went on a Wednesday, which is the least traveled day here, and so the guards are paying no attention, I could get out the door that would lead to the west, and 100 yards away was a bus stop. And if I couldn't get through there, the door that led to the harbor, and I could swim to one of the hundreds of boats that were out there. So on a Wednesday, I pantomime with him, and he says yes, that he's going to help me. And so when they gather the stuff up and I'm standing near this shaft that's there, he has one of his buddies faint or fake fainting. And all the cops run over to help me. He lifts up the clothes, I jump in, he opens the thing, and down I go. And I'm praying. Here's this agnostic praying. I hope there's some dirty clothes down there that I can wear.
And I would imagine when he fake fainted, that was the real germ of the origins of fake news, right?
Yeah, that is funny, because that's what happened also at Dealey Plaza. Some guy fainted to distract people. But anyway, I hit the dirty clothes. I am so happy. I'm only wearing one raggedy outfit. And I run to the west door, and it's locked. God, how can it be locked? Jesus, did I make a mistake? Then I run to the southeast door, to the lake, the ocean, and it's locked. I do this 3 or 4 times and then get so tired, I sit down and close and I fall asleep. And then I feel somebody shaking my body, and it's a guard. And he says, well, what do we have here? A live body and all this dirty clothing. He said, who are you? And I said, I'm John Barbour. He said, well, what's John Barbour doing in his dirty clothing in the basement? And I said, I'm trying to escape. So he said, well, come on upstairs. So he takes me to the office, and three of them interviewed for me for half an hour. They are convinced that I had cohorts who were helping me. And I convinced them that I had absolutely no cohorts. I did it on my own. So he takes me upstairs, opens the door. Now, every Hispanic there is standing by their cot and staring and wondering, did Johnny Barbour, this Canadian rap? And they realize I didn't. So when I come in, I said to the guard, I said, hey, why is it that on a Wednesday the doors were locked? And he said, you idiots, it's July 4th. It's the American holiday. So the Mexicans started calling me Julio Cuatro. Now, here's the upshot to this story. Is 25 years later, almost to the date. I was 17. So I was 47 when I started Real People. I get this letter in the mail. And the letter says, Mr. Barbour, I'm telling my family and my kids and my neighbors that you are the guy that I rescued from the basement in San Diego, that was you. So would you please confirm it, because they think I'm a lying idiot who just loves celebrities. So I sent him back a gorgeous picture of me in his $700 suit, arm in arm with Sarah Purcell. And I said, I've been looking for you for about 25 or 30 years. And I said, because if you hadn't found me, I'd either be in the Merchant Navy or I'd be in jail. Instead, I'm here with Real People making $30,000 a week.
How did you come up with the idea for Real People? It became such an iconic series that seemed to really resonate with people. And it was the first time people saw a program, reality TV, on network television ever. What was the inspiration for it?
That's a great, great question. And it has a couple of wonderful stories attached to it. As the critic at large at NBC, I had the smallest office, but it was right next to all the teletype machines. And they used to call these teletype machines reliable sources, because this is where the news stories would come. And on the stories that weren't for broadcast, it would always say, warning, not for broadcast. And I began reading these stories, and I came across one that was absolutely hilarious. It was called The Stripper for God. And so I kept rummaging through them and found more stories. There was one about the Nub Club. It was in Louisiana, that some poor people who could not get jobs could only get money from the government if they had some kind of physical affliction. So there were bunches of them shooting their toes off, and it became known as the Nub Club. And I thought, oh my God, this stuff is gold. So I created I created the idea for it, and I didn't know how to go about selling it, but I got sidetracked because one of my movie reviews that led me to becoming Frank Sinatra's private writer. So, okay, so because I have to continue with this, because when I created the idea, okay, so I have to put that on hold a bit, but I'll get to it quickly. Anyway, you remember the movie The Great Gatsby, Robert Redford?
Yes.
Oh, big. You must remember it was on the cover of Time. on the
Oh,
cover of
yeah.
Newsweek. But in Hollywood, they had these Gatsby parties in Bel Air and in Beverly Hills and in all the restaurants. And the president of Paramount, his name is Barry Diller.
Oh, sure. Yeah. He
Yeah.
also started QVC and the shopping networks and everything. Yeah.
Right, Fox News, but I have only always referred to him as Phyllis Diller because he is a Phyllis. He is not a Barry, and he doesn't like that. Anyway, with the movie, it was the second time they made The Great Gatsby. They made it the first time with Alan Ladd and Veronica Lake. And it was a lousy movie then because they told the story the way F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote the book. And that was the mistake because the movie opens with Robert Redford, handsome as all get out, wearing $1,000 suits in this, must be $20 million estate, and all these gorgeous, beautiful people running around drinking and fornicating and whatever it was they're doing. And America was having a tough time at the time. And so there's nobody there to like. And you don't get to what made Robert Redford and Gatsby a billionaire until the last few pages of the book, where he had a life like mine at the beginning. He was dirt poor, and on his own, he created his own wealth. Oh, who gives a crap at that time? You just don't like him, okay? So in any event, Diller says that God, you are so talented. Look at how he gets up there. Look at how handsome that guy is.
He was, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know us on the East Coast, we move fast.
Yeah. Look at that great suit on him, because what Diller said publicly, if you buy stock in Paramount, you will more than triple your investment, because Paramount has just bought one of the leading clothiers in New York City, and we're putting out the Gatsby line of clothing. And he was telling everybody, he had all these press conferences, everything. You invest in Paramount Studios, Paramount Pictures, you're going to more than triple that money. Now, at the time, it only cost $3 to get in to see a movie. And he said, this film is so outstanding and going to be so in demand with people around the block, I'm going to charge a hard ticket price of $6. And so that's what they did. So I went and saw the film. I go out. I was on with Tom Snyder. Do you remember Tom Snyder?
Oh, I miss him. Yes.
Well,
the Tomorrow Show first on NBC, right? Yeah.
That's right. Well, he was the anchor at the 6 o'clock news.
Yes.
And he was my biggest fan. So I would sit next to him and do my reviews, which were often funny. And you could always hear him chuckling when you shouldn't be chuckling when you're doing the news. But I was funny. And in any event, it came time for me to review now The Great Gatsby. And I decimated the film with what I am telling you, but with some clever, funny lines. And then the very last line, I said, the only way that Barry Diller is going to get $6 for this movie is if he charges $3 to get in and $3 to get out. It literally destroyed the film. That line was picked up in every newspaper in America, and the movie justifiably died. Now, I after Real People, I did 2 great pilots, one for CBS and one for Fox, which was run by Phyllis Diller. And the guy who financed it, who was the general manager at Fox, said this is going to be bigger than Real People because it's about real news and it's called Reliable Sources. And my host was Greg Kinnear.
Oh, yes.
Who became a movie star. And then, of course, Diller said, Barber's never getting on anything that I'm involved with. So in any event, get to Real People. Oh yeah. After that review, I get a call from George Slaughter. And George Slaughter was the original co-creator of Laugh-In. The real creator was an English drunkard named Digby Wolfe. He came up with the title. He came up with everything. And they stole a lot of Ernie Kovac's material.
And he just wrote a book too, I believe, too, his memoir.
Oh, yeah. and it's god awful.
Yeah.
I mean, he says in his book that John Barbour was an afterthought. He never hired me. And of course, the host of the show, and I didn't call in or anything, if the host of the show had any information or brains, the first thing he would say to Slaughter is, hey, if Barbour was an afterthought, how come you made him producer for the 3 years that he was there? And how come he was the one that sued ABC over That's Incredible and won instead of you? I mean, that man is a born criminal liar. But for the first 2 years, he gave me absolute total control of the show because he could see that I was making him a mega millionaire. But by the third year, we started to almost get into fist fights because he hires this 12-year-old kid to be a co-host. And I'm screaming at him, that kid cannot be a co-host of this adult show. It became awful. Anyway, so what happens is I get a call from Slaughter because he loves the joke about the $6. And then he said, he said, your reviews in LA Magazine are so hilarious. Can I borrow some of the jokes? Oh, and better still, could you come on as our critic at large? Because, Laugh-In doesn't have anything more than 8 or 10 seconds long. You can be our critic at large and be one of our writers. He had 18 writers. One of them was Letterman's girlfriend. I was there a week and he fired them all. And myself and Digby Wolfe wrote the 4 specials and then the 6 specials. And when I was the only one whose jokes Frank Sinatra would use. Now, I hate to say this because I'm so indebted to Mr. Sinatra, but the truth is the truth. When he came in to do the first show and they showed him the material of the other 17 writers, who wrote this shit? Who wrote this shit? He just threw it on the ground. And then Digby had my material and he showed it to him. And Sinatra started to laugh. And he said, who wrote this? So Digby says, Johnny. Now, Laugh-In didn't have a studio audience. It was all, it was all fake laughter. But I was so intimidated by seeing him again in real life. And I'm in my 40s. I'm sitting way up there. And he waves his finger like this. Kid, he calls me kid. Like that. So I leap down as fast as I can. I said, yes, Mr. Sinatra. Now, I knew that he hated this movie critic called Rex Reed. Do you remember Rex Reed?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, Rex Reed. So then he says, you wrote all this stuff? I said, yes, sir. And he said, hold it a second. Oh, and I must tell you, after the closing line of the only way that Diller will get $6 to charge 3 to get out. The funniest ad lib I ever heard in the news was Tom Snyder. And he looks in the camera. He says, some of us will be right back. So, there you go. My God, you guys are genius. You are a genius. So, in any
guys event, or guy?
Guy, it's you. You're a one-man band. But in any event.
Yeah. Tom Snyder was really an original, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. And then what happens is he looks closer at me and he said, hold it.
Yeah.
Aren't you that movie critic who's on with Tom Snyder?
Yeah.
And I said, yes, sir. I'm known as the heterosexual Rex Reed. Well, he laughed so hard. He said, can I say that on the show? Can I say on this this new show. Well, when the show, oh yes, and then Digby Wolf said to him beyond that, and I wish he hadn't. I had just recorded my first album called "It's Tough to Be White," and they had a hard time getting it released because that was about the Black Power movement. There were riots all around the country, and my wife Sarita was a band singer for Earl Father Hines. Does that name ring a bell to you?
Yes, but remind our viewers just in case.
Okay, Earl Father Hines is the godfather of jazz pianists. He was part of the original Louis Armstrong sextet, but he did not like Louis's drinking or womanizing or drugs or anything. So he quit after 6 years, moved to San Francisco, started a big band, and his singer was my wife, Sarita. Boy, and can that lady sing. And of course, being connected with Earl Father Hines, her best friends became Red Fox, who became my mentor as a comedian, and Dick Gregory. And when they were having a hard time releasing my album, Dick called up and said, listen, let me do the liner notes. So Dick Gregory did the liner notes, and the album became very successful. And my second album was based on my movie reviews, and it was called I Met a Man I Didn't Like. And the liner notes were those of Neil Simon, Joan Rivers, Paul Williams, and Burt Reynolds. So anyway, I want to get to the business of real people. So Sinatra has me on the Tonight Show. The Laugh-In show is over, okay, but he gets to host the Tonight Show, and he knows that Carson hates me. And one of the reasons Carson hates me, I was first booked on Johnny Carson's show June 6, 1968. Do you remember what day that was?
Yes, sure. Yes.
Tell the audience.
Yes, it's a horrific day.
Yes.
That was
the day they shot Bobby Kennedy.
Yeah.
And I'm telling Carson, you cannot do a show. And he said, well, we have to entertain the people. I said, you can't entertain the people. They just murdered the next president of the United States. He said, if you don't do my show, you'll never do my show. And I made the biggest mistake in my life as a performer. I decided to do the show. Of course, I bombed. It was the only time in my life I bombed. What I wished I had done is not done a joke, but walked down there and told the audience why I wanted to become American. I mean, it was the land of second opportunity, the only country in the world made up of people from every other country in the world, the only country built on a foundation of laws beforehand, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That's what I should have done. And bombing, I figured, well, I better get off this stage, and I go to leave, and he calls me to sit at the couch. And the reason I hated that, I could smell my mother. That guy was the most god-awful, insincere drunk I ever met. And I could smell my mother with him. And from that day onward, he tried to get me fired when I was one of the most successful personalities on NBC. There are a lot of great stories about that in the book that we won't have time to go into. But in any event, Frank Sinatra gets to host the Night Show for two reasons. One of the reasons is he wants to stick it to Carson himself. So he puts Johnny Barbour on. And I will tell you this, because it's true. In the Tonight Show, Doc Severinsen's orchestra would play very loud during the commercial break. I am so impressed by you guys, by you. I mean, holy smokes! I can't believe you're this talented. Oh my God! Anyway. The orchestra would play during the commercial breaks to keep people quiet. Now, Sinatra says, we'll be right back after this. and I was going to be the next one out. And there's no orchestra. So for 2 or 3 minutes during the break, people can't sit still. They start talking, and it gets so noisy. I literally wanted to run away from the studio because I said, my God, this is the second time I'm going to bomb. And I had never, ever bombed in my life. I only know 4 comics who never bombed. It was myself, Red Fox, the Jewish comic. Oh my God. Oh, you know who I'm talking about. And the Rodney Dangerfield, they like never bombed. So, but when I got out there,
Alan King?
No, not Alan King. Jackie Mason.
Jackie Mason, yes.
Because I was going to hire him as my consumer advocate in the first Real People pilot, which I'm going to get to right now for you. So,
oh my God, how hilarious that would be.
oh my God, would it ever? And, we may run a hair over an hour. I hope so, just so I can.
Yeah, we don't put a time on this. Last time I saw Jackie Mason was in Sardi's. We were having dinner in Sardi's in New York, and he was at a table with this lovely lady, significantly younger, but he was having a wonderful time.
I remember his very first line when he was on the Ed Sullivan Show before I became a comic. I mean, I love all comics, and I don't know why I have this photographic memory. Just all of this stuff pops up. I don't even have to write anything down. One of the reasons I don't have to write anything down is because Mark Twain said, if you tell the truth, you don't have to have a good memory. So anyway, I'm incorrigible. You said earlier, before we went on the air, that you were an old soul.
My father has always said, Jim, old soul, probably born 30 years too late, and I should have gone into comedy.
Well, I must tell you, I've said this about myself. Intellectually, I'm 5,000 years old. Chronologically, right now, I'm 90. But emotionally, I'm 8.
Right.
Because I have this incorrigible urge to absolutely tell the truth as I see it. And if I have one bit of talent that sounds so strange to anyone, I have the talent to see the obvious that people overlook, and then either verbalize it or write a joke about it or write something about it. Anyway, so any of it, I do really well on the Tonight Show. I get an absolute ovation when it's over. You go to my site, www.johnbarbersworld.com. You'll see this great introduction by Francis, and a number of times. And one of the jokes that got almost a standing ovation was my reference to working with Tom Snyder. And hang on a second, I gotta throw this away. Anyway, sorry, I thought I had turned that off. Sorry about that. And in any event, the line I had about Tom Snyder was, he was the kind of anchor man who gave you the impression the news was there to bring you him. God,
yes, that's a good way. Yes.
Yeah, Sinatra almost died. Anyway, when it was over, my wife and I are out in the hall, and Francis tells me that he needs to talk to me tomorrow. So I go out in the hall with my wife. Everybody's inviting me to parties and to play tennis. The only time I went to any celebrity's house was Kirk Douglas's house, when he said he would kidnap me if I didn't come to his house after he appeared in one of my shows. And mine was only a local show, and he said was the greatest interview he ever did. Like, this is turning into the greatest interview I ever did. Anyway,
I don't see now. The story I heard is you went to Kirk Douglas' house, basically, really, to be truthful, because you really liked that onion dip they were serving that night.
In any event, the,
In any event.
yeah, the band leader
That's
said,
always a good segue. In any event.
the, the band leader came out and he apologized. And I said, what are you apologizing for? And he said, well, we were ordered by Sinatra. We were ordered by Johnny Carson not to play any music during the commercial before you came on. And he said, I'm so sorry. We love you, but he's our boss. And I said, listen, it worked out really very well. So thank you very much. But the very next day on the Tonight Show, Carson bombed me. He said, you'd see that critic at large. He should stick around being a critic, for God's sake. And then they inserted canned laughter and applause because the audience did not respond, because anybody who could watch the show could see that I was a hit, as you could see if you watch it. So in order to get even, I go on the news and I'm sitting next to Tom Snyder. And of course, Snyder has to say to me, hey, did you see what Johnny said about your act last night? Now we're live at 6 o'clock. And I said, yes, I'm not dumb, deaf, and blind. So he said, what do you think? I said, well, I guess I have to tell you a true story about Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson has a staff of 32 people. And I said, they have a really big bucket in the front of the office. And in that bucket, every day when one of these 32 come in, everyone, they have to drop a quarter into that bucket. And if Johnny shows up sober or he shows up on time, the first person that he says hello to gets the contents of the bucket. And that bucket is now up to $420,050. That was Johnny Carson. Well, of course, the newsroom just howled. They just howled. And the paradox about this was when I sat next to Johnny in the makeup room, Harry Crane was a makeup artist. He made me up for the news, made Johnny up for his show. He was always so friendly to me. And I once was fired by NBC. I was fired 3 times. And was for my review of Jerry Lewis and the telethon, which I don't want to get to now because I want to get to real people. And Johnny Carson stood up and paced around and gave his impression of Jerry Lewis if they ever find a cure for muscular dystrophy. And it was hilarious. I mean, it was Rodney Dangerfield, it was Lenny Bruce, it was Shecky Green. And I said, well, Johnny, why don't you do that at the Sahara Hotel when you go up there to work? And he said, no, Johnny. He said, I like to work. But it was and that's what he was really good when he talked to guests who were entertaining. But when William Buckley and Gore Vidal were on, he didn't know how to talk to anybody who was smart. So you never saw smart people on his show. But Jack Paar could handle absolutely everybody. So anyway, I get a call the next day from Jim Garrison, and he asked me if he can borrow some of the material. And I said, absolutely, whatever you want. He said, well, you had a straight line in there that you said that Watergate was something that might put America on the brink of democracy. He said, it's a straight line, but it got huge applause. And I said, yeah. And I said, I didn't expect it. So we talked for a half an hour about the people involved with the murder of John Kennedy, who were involved at Watergate and in Dallas. And then we talked another 15 or 20 minutes about William Shakespeare. And then after he ends up, Sinatra called. He says, can you come to my office on Formosa Avenue? I want to talk to you. So I go in there, and you know what, Jim? You wouldn't look at me. I got all kinds of celebrities here. I never once posed for any of these pictures. Not one celebrity I was ever with Sinatra, with Ali. I never posed. I just did my job. Other people took the pictures and sent them to me. And my wife saved them all. I didn't do. I had no interest in that. I just, like you, to do my job. Anyway, Sinatra says to me, how would you like to come with me on the road, $3,500 a week for 8 months? And now he had two comics that traveled with him all the time. One was Tom Dreesen, who spoke at his funeral, very funny. And the other guy, I did a piece as a critic when I was a critic at large, and Sinatra called and thanked me for recognize this guy as a brilliant young comic, and I can't remember his name, sadly. Anyway, and I said, no, I can't do that, Mr. Sinatra. He said, what do you mean you can't do that? You're only making $350 a week. You get 150 Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's $350. He said, you're going to get 3,500, and you're going to get the recognition nationally that I think you deserve. And I said, I can't do it. And he said, why can't you do it? And I said, because my father deserted me when I was 6, and the pain was excruciating, and I'm not going to inflict that pain on my son. So I'll take my $350 a week. And my son was a Caucasian Tiger Woods. And he won the Canadian National when he was 15, shot his first competitive 69 when he was 13 against Phil Mickelson. I mean, really talented, and went to Stanford on a golf scholarship. Wow. But in any event, Sinatra leans over and he said, well, you and I have to do something, okay? He said, I love you. You're mine. And if I can't show it to you now, it's in the book. Up on the wall is the only letter I ever got from a celebrity. I got lots of letters from Burt Reynolds, which are in the book. This is the only one I have in the wall. When he says, you're mine, and you and I are going to do something together. And I said, well, listen, why don't you do the Italian Kunta Kinte? Do you remember who Kunta Kinte is?
From Roots, yeah.
That's exactly it.
Played by, wasn't it LeVar Burton?
Yeah, LeVar Burton.
The miniseries on ABC that rocked the world. Yeah.
Rocked the world. It was the most successful show on ABC and on television for like 10 years.
Cicely Tyson, John Amos. I mean, it was
loaded with
incredible people.
He said, well, what are you talking about, Johnny? An Italian roots? What are you talking about? And I said, well, Bing Crosby was 77 when he died on a Spanish golf course. He said, don't you talk about my man Bing. He was my idol. That's why I became a singer. No, I'm just saying this to you. Do you ever hear any Bing Crosby music in a restaurant anywhere? No, you do not hear it. I said, but you're more than a singer. You were a social and political force. You can't go into any Italian restaurant in the world where they're not playing your music. And if you and the Rat Pack had not sung for John Kennedy, he's got high hopes. That man would have never become president of the United States because only won by the slimmest of margins, aided out by some mafiosa in Chicago. So that was a questionable election too. So
didn't they say that on radio, Nixon won on content, but on television, Kennedy won because he looked so great with the makeup, and so the television audience went with Kennedy, and radio audience.
You know what the big difference was? Kennedy didn't sweat.
That's right.
If you look at the videos, yeah, you see
where Nixon was,
my God, pouring down. So, okay, so where were we? Because
you're doing Sinatra, and
okay. So anyway, I say, what it will do, I'll bring a camera to your house, and I'm going to ask you questions about your entire life for months and months. We'll leave the tapes there. You just let me edit it and assemble it and write it. And I said, you will never hear my voice asking the questions. You're going to be on camera, and you'll be the only performer in history who is doing a visual autobiography 5 times a week, Monday through Friday. That's why the Italian roots. And I said, I'm going to ask you the first one of the early questions, or maybe when you're more comfortable. is how come you were walking into this Sahara Tahoe, I mean, Lake Tahoe, with the mafioso guy, Sam Giancana? And he stared at me and stared at me. And he said, my God, kid. He's calling me kid now. Now I'm 46. Hey, kid, you got balls. How can you do that? And I said, listen, Mr. Sinatra, the truth is the truth, okay? And at the time, he didn't want me to say that because he was in front of the gaming commission over the Sands Hotel denying that he knew any of these gangsters, when indeed they were very, very, very close. But he said, will you write it up, bring it to Dorothy, my secretary, and see when we can get started. So I didn't get to keep my $350 a week from KNBC, even though I was responsible for 10% of the news, and Kelly Lang, the weather girl, was responsible for 10% of the news, but she got $2,000 a week. They wouldn't give me a $50 a week, so I had to quit. So I go home, and I'm going to tell you the happiest day of my life. I stood across the street from my little bungalow, and I thought, geez, I'm 46. I'm never going to be the next Jack Barr. What am I thinking of? I'm never going to get real people on the air. And I said, but everybody wants me to be a comic. And I never wanted my son. I only gave my wife our son after 3 years of my failure trying to become a star. She said, oh my God, when I told her one day, I turned down a game show where I'd get $1,750 a week because I would be a traffic cop. They wouldn't let me tell jokes or be funny. And I said, I don't want to be a traffic cop. And my wife started to cry and said, oh my God, we can't have a baby. And one of the reasons I dated her was I didn't want a child because I didn't know if I'd end up being like my father. So I said, well, listen, we'll give you a child for 3 years. She said, hey, honey, a child is for a lifetime, okay? I said, okay, that's true. You can have the child and I'll still try to pursue my career. She got pregnant that afternoon. And, here's divine intervention again. This is when Merv Griffin calls me and saying, Westinghouse is going to put you under contract for 6 months at $600 a week as my replacement. And this was when my wife is going into labor. So I'm signing this. Now, do you think that I am thinking about a baby or about a wife? No, I'm a selfish performer. And remind you to tell me one more story about selfish performers, and that was Cesar Chavez and me. So in any event, without taking any shots or pills or C-section or anything, the doctor came out, and Dr. Faust, and he said, John, I just wanted to tell you, your wife, Sarita, was just absolutely magnificent. She loved being in labor. She loved being in pain, and she loved delivery. And she told me to tell you that you are now the father of an 8-pound, 9-ounce host. And I started to bawl like a baby. I mean, here I am selfishly thinking about being a host, and she has the greatest moment in her life. And I felt it was the first time anybody ever loved me, for God's sake. So, and without her, there would have been no real people, as I'll get to right now. So in any event, I'm fired, but I said, this is the greatest day of my life. I stood across from the bungalow, and I'm not going to be Jack Barr. I'm not going to get it. Anyway, I'll just get a job as a comedy writer and be a father to my son.
Mm-hmm. So, were you still with Merv Griffin at the time?
Well, no, not any longer, because they gave the job to David Frost. So I'm 46 and unemployed and unemployable. I mean, every producer in Hollywood and director and actor, except for a few, were thrilled I got fired. I was the most quoted critic in America at the time. And I had the only review that was ever taken to the Supreme Court because the producer wanted equal time because of a negative review. I don't want to keep distracting myself with all these great stories. But in any event, the relief of not.
I've never heard anybody say that. I don't want to keep distracting myself with these great stories. It's a good kind of distraction.
Well, anyway, the weight of having this horrible ambition just lifted. And I had this feeling of lightness of soul, total relief. And I go in the house. Oh my God, it's like I'm floating on air. I hug my son. I kiss my wife. And I said, I'm going to get a job as a comedy writer. She said, well, I wouldn't bet on that. And I said, why? She said, Digby Wolf just called. He wants you to call him right away. I'll say, so I called Digby. And I get home, and Chris Hayward is at my house. Chris Hayward was a producer and head writer of Barney Miller. And he is the one who so brilliantly wrote the scripts that ABC was on the verge of canceling them. I don't know if you remember, but in the early Barney Miller, half of it took place in the office, half of it took place at home, half in the precinct, half at home. And Chris Hayward said, hey, it should all be in this dirty jail. And Danny Arnold said, who wants to look at a dirty jail for half an hour? And Chris Hayward said, don't you remember the movie Detective Story with Kirk Douglas? No. So in any event, Chris Hayward writes a show in which there's a snowstorm and they can't leave the office. And it's seen by the critic for Time magazine, who talks about what a brilliant show this is. And ABC decides to extend it for another 13 weeks. Well, that's the kind of influence and brains Chris Hayward had, who's my son's godfather. So I go home and he says, hey, I've been thinking about your Real People show. Why don't Serena and I go see Danny Arnold? He has a development deal at ABC. And let's see what happens. So my wife and he go to Danny Arnold. And in 10 minutes, they get me a contract for 13 weeks at $1,000 a week to develop a show, which I'm going to call National Graffiti. That's because it's a combination of National Enquirer stories and that a great Universal film, American Graffiti. Oh, what a great film. So I put the two together, and I go out and I shoot a bunch of stories, and my co-host is going to be Richie Pryor. Now, at the time, Richie Pryor's in jail because he has a series of specials he's doing for NBC. And one of the Standards and Practices edited out one of his skits, and he went in and he punched the guy out. So they called the cops and they arrested him. They put him in jail. And then the Internal Revenue Service is waiting to arrest him when he gets out. But what he could do when he was in Oakland or Berkeley, he could put 5,000 acids in seats. And we were very, very close friends. And I asked him, do you mind just co-hosting a show? He said, my God, I love the idea, Real People. So Barney Miller sets me up a meeting with a guy named Lou Ehrlich. See, I can remember all this stuff from years ago. And I go in there and see him. Now, I have written 5 scripts. I've registered to the Writers Guild. I've gone and shot a half a dozen stories, including the famous Stripper for God, which is really funny. And I sit down in front of Lou Ehrlich, and he said, what the hell is this shit? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, I don't understand what you're talking about. Little people. And I said, they're not little people. They're real people. And they're more interesting than almost any actor or writer or singer that I have ever met. Real people. He said, well, not on television, they're not. And he said, so you think this will have any appeal? And I said, yes, because my co-host is going to be Richard Pryor. Now I'm quoting Lou Ehrlich, and this is how they would talk, okay, in the late 70s. He says, that nigger's never getting on this network. And you mean shit to television. Danny Arnold is king. And the only reason I'm looking at this shit is because he likes it. But I don't want it. But he wants it. So we're going to shoot. There you go. Genius at work again. God, was he talented. Anyway, so in any event,
so you were probably shocked when he said that, huh, too?
I almost fell off my chair, but he called me shit too, you know. I was not shit. I've got 5 Emmys. He said it's only local shit. He was really, really cruel. But so anyway, we shoot the pilot, and Lou Ehrlich and Danny Arnold assign an actor and an actress who are god awful in front of a camera and totally unnatural, just talking to an audience about reality and real people. And that part of the show bombs. But the stories, the stripper for God, the unluckiest man in the world, America's only professional vampire hunter from New York. His name is Kaplan, and he's a lawyer. Great stories. I mean, huge applause. So after the audience leaves, I go up to Ehrlich and I go up to Danny Arnold. And I said, Danny, listen, I was promised creative control of this show. And so please give me what you promised me. And Lou, you think I'm shit, so you leave me alone. And Danny, you leave me alone and live up to your promise. So Danny says, well, you're on your own now. You mean I can run the show now? He said, no, you can run home because you're fired. And they fired me from the start of that particular show. So now we have to leap forward to the phone call after they decide. I take it to 10 producers, they all turn it down. And there's when I'm 46 and I'm standing in front of my bungalow. And I realize real people's over with. I'm not Jack Parr. And I called Digby Wolf and he said, John, I have this development deal at Westinghouse. And I remember you were under contract to replace Merv. So they'll probably be thrilled with you. I'm sorry you're having a difficult time at ABC with your reality show, but why don't you come in here, bring your tapes, and let's see what I can do. So I go in there, and Digby's office is right across from George's. So while Digby's on the phone, I sit down on the sofa. And after about 10 minutes, the door opens, and out walks George. Oh, John, how great to see you. Now, he used to be the bouncer at Zeros, so he was tough. He picked me up and hugged me real tight. How great to see you. What are you doing here? And I said, well, Digby wants to talk to me. No, you come in here and talk to me. So I don't know what I'm going to go talk to him about. So I sit right next to him at his desk. And he said, I'm sorry you're having trouble with ABC and your reality show. How would you like to do it here? And I do a double take. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I just got a call from who was the guy that was the president of NBC? Tartikoff,
yeah.
No, it wasn't Tartikoff.
Was it Silverman, Fred Silverman?
Yeah, it was Freddie Silverman. Thank God for you. Anyway, it was Freddie Silverman, one of the dumbest people ever in television. He was head of programming at CBS.
Could you be more specific? No.
Okay. I'll tell you, my agent, Murray Schwartz, who was Murray's agent, became my agent. And he took me in to meet Freddie Silverman. And Murray said, this guy is an ex-Jack Parr. You should give him some kind of afternoon talk show. And Silverman, who looked like he was 21 or 22, looks at me in disdain and said, I've seen him. He's too soft. An insult like that. But you know what he did the next day? He canceled Hollywood Squares. Said it was the worst show on television. And NBC picked it up. And there it was for 20 some odd years. And I have a chapter in my book simply called How Do These People Get These Jobs?
Exactly.
Which is hilarious. So in any event, oh my God, I almost
Well, you had some time with the Gong Show too, didn't you?
Yes, I was the original host
Yes.
of the Gong Show. And the wonderful thing about this, if you buy the book, all these stories are in the book, but you don't have to read from beginning to end. You can just look at and it doesn't have any chapters in it. It's written like it's a collection of newspaper articles inspired by Ben Hecht, who was he was Hollywood's greatest film writer, the only man who ever wrote a fan letter to, and he responded and came and took me down to Laguna Beach with him. God, so many stories. I don't want to get into that. But in any event, you can browse around and find out something you might. And this is 5 pages of the Gong Show that is not only hilarious, it is wonderful. Now, I'm going to get back to one thing that you said when we were off the air about reality television. I said this when I got Real People on the air. It was Gary Deeb, who was a film critic, television critic for the Chicago Tribune. And I was there for 2 weeks to fill in for a host that had gone to Los Angeles. And they wanted me back there for 3 weeks or a month while they were searching for another host. And while I was back there, I was telling Gary that the thing I wanted to do was a reality show about real people. So when I got it on the air, that's a guy who dubbed me the Godfather of Reality Television. But when I got it on the air, I said to my wife, you know what? And to Chris Hayward, because he was responsible for helping me, I said, you know what it's like? It's like opening a new bottle of Lafite Rothschild, this wonderful French wine. Oh my God, it's so original and so good. But if you leave that wine out there, it turns to vinegar. And it's like a well-digested meal will eventually turn to shit. And that's what reality television has turned to. I mean, when you got into television, when I got into television, you had to have a modicum of intelligence, a little bit of personality. You had to be original. You had to be one of a kind. Today, the only talent you need to be in television is an absence of embarrassment. It is just so god awful. It's just irredeemably god awful and bad. The only thing I watch on television, I watch hockey, of course. I watch Doc Martin on PBS, which I love, and then I watch golf, and that's the extent of it. It's almost impossible for me to watch. That's why, I wanted to applaud at the opening of your show. Just your opening credits are worth a standing ovation because they are so brilliantly put together. Now, where was I?
I appreciate that. You were talking about Gong Show, and you were talking about the book, and it's all in the book.
Yeah, I wanted to get back to the business.
What inspired you to write the book?
Well, because so many people were, when I would go out anywhere, and it's like you and I just having a conversation, not only would my table where I was sitting get quiet, people would get up from other tables and come around and gather around and stand and listen to these stories. And I have always imagined myself since a child as a storyteller. And that's the one thing that I love to do, even if I'm doing a one-line joke, like when the world, ever since 1917, the United States had been trying to destroy the Soviet Union for 5 years after the revolution in 17. America, Germany, France, Germany, and England sent in troops for 5 years to restore the Romanovs to the throne. Okay. And they've been anti-Russian ever since. And of course, now they're banging Putin. And so I wrote a joke the other day that people love, but I don't like to write about politics anymore at all because it's irredeemable. It's irrecoverable now in America. But I said, now we have proof that Putin is a liar. He called Trump a genius. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
You also got a chance to work with the incomparable Dean Martin too, right? On the Dean Martin show.
Yeah. Oh my God. I've forgotten some of the real people stuff that I wanted to tell you that's really, really important. But Dean Martin was by the most professional entertainer that I was ever around in television. I was on his show a half a dozen times, and we would rehearse in these cavernous studios. Nobody was allowed in these studios but the performers and the crew. And nobody was allowed to talk while anybody was rehearsing. It didn't matter if it was me, a beginning comic, or it was Lena Horne or Peggy Lee. He was just wonderful. I'll tell you how good a human being he was. His son was killed. His son did not have to join the military, but he wanted to do something for America, the America that made his father a star. And he joined the Air Force, and he crashed into a mountain in San Bernardino and got killed. Dean used to play golf every single day at the Riviera Country Club, which my sister managed, by the way, before she became an executive at CBS. And one day there, I'm with my son, Christopher. Now, my Christopher could outdo Tiger Woods when he was 6, when Tiger was 6. People would gather around to watch this kid hit balls on the national news, local news. And anyway, Dean comes over, and I've been on his show a couple of times, so he's really friendly. Hey, John, that's your boy? I said, yeah. Did you teach him to do that? And I said, no, not at all. He said, well, how did he do it? And I said, one day I was watching golf, and I had a sandwich in my hand, and I'm watching the Masters, and I'm just swinging a club, and I hear this clank, 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 and I turn around, and my son's got a wooden spoon and a wooden block, and he's trying to bat it around the ground. So he starts chuckling. I said, so the next day I got this plastic putter and a wiffle ball, and for a week he could not hit the wiffle ball over the ground. But being a genius, he's one of 3 that I know, he turned the shaft like that, or the blade like that, bang, and up went there. And that's what he did, and that's how he became it. So he says to Christopher, how would you like to play golf with me today? And my son turns to me and said, Dad? And I said, absolutely, son. Now, Dean lost $2,000 a day playing golf. And I'll tell you how Dean got rich. He said the 2 greatest days in his life were the day he met Jerry Lewis and the day he left Jerry Lewis. But when he was hired to be the Italian Ed Sullivan. Mm-hmm. He was just going to host an ordinary show and introduce puppets and dancers and singers or whatever. And he was bombing, literally bombing. And so they were going to cancel the show. His producer's name was Greg Garrison. How interesting, another Garrison. And so when it was announced that the show would be canceled, Dean called Greg to have a drink and thank him so much for what he was doing. And Greg says to him, why are you giving up? And he said, well, I got movies to do. And he said, you dopey dago, do you realize that in 1 week on television, more people watch you than every single damn Westerner thing you're ever in? Get back on television. He said, they're not going to take me back. I said, because you're not an Italian Ed Sullivan. You're just an original Dean Martin. And what do? You like the girls. and you like to drink. So your show should open with a piano player at a piano bar, and there's a little stool out there, and it's got a drink on it, and you come out and pick up that drink, sit there, and there's a lot of these gorgeous girls. Call them gold diggers, for God's sake, because that's all that beautiful women are, gold diggers, and that should be your show. So Dean said, "You think that'll work?" He says, "It's a slam dunk because it's you. It's you." So then Dean said, "Well, will you direct it and produce it if I go back and ask him if I could try this one time?" And Greg said, "No." And Dean said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Listen, you didn't even know how to do your show the first time. And I don't want you telling me how to direct and produce your show. If I don't have total control over your show, then I'm gone," which is a really ballsy thing to say to Dean Martin. And Dean Martin stood up, shook his hand, and he says, "Greg, I swear on the tombs of those who have died in my family that you will have creative control of the show. And not only that, you will own half of my television show." Well, the rest was history, because Dean Martin became the largest, wealthiest stockholder in RCA in history, almost became a billionaire. And when he died, his handshake was challenged by family members and friends, but it held up in a court of law. That's the only time I think the law in America has ever done the very right thing. Martin. So anyway, but his hobby was losing money at golf, and he could afford it with his two buddies. And his two buddies were really upset. And he said, "Listen, I'll lose my 2,000 tomorrow, okay? Let's go. I'm taking this kid with me." He played the entire 18 holes with a 6-year-old boy. My son would hit the ball 25 yards. Dean would hit it 190. Pick up my son, pick up the ball. And that's how they played 18 holes. And I didn't think about this until about 12 or 13 years ago, when I was living in my other house on a golf course. And I thought, oh my God, I have to, these things happen to me a lot. Again, this is something that hits me. I have to write Dean a letter. Oh my God. And recount that to him, because the few times that we ever ran into him, he had to know what my son was doing. Okay. So I sit down to write the letter, and on comes the news that Dean Martin has died. And
in 1987.
Yeah, and I bawled like a baby. I bawled. Yeah. And now let me tell you this story. When they did the Dean Martin shows, they would do a dress rehearsal that was live in front of an audience. And they would make notes about everything. And they would let the audience stay afterwards, those who wished, and watch the real show tape, even though it was the same show with a few modifications. So I'm there, I think it's my 4th or 5th show, and I'm standing there, okay, and Greg is upstairs, and he says, "Okay, John, on your spot, red light, camera, okay, shoot him." So I start, my mother was Jewish and my father was Scotch, which only proves to you that you can mix anything with Scotch. And I used to have a lot of trouble as a kid because I was the only kid at the synagogue with a plaid skull cap. And you have no idea how tough it is to play Ava the Gill on the bagpipes. I mean, always, and I'm getting screamed. And then he yells down at me. He says, "I saw you do this on the Merv Griffin show, and that's why I booked you." Now the audience is listening to all this. And he said, "I want to come downstairs and talk to you a minute." So I don't know what he wants to talk about. He comes down, he puts his arm around me, real nice. He said, "I go and watch you at the jazz club. You work out your material for television. You do great political stuff. Could you think of a political joke or two that you could do instead of the Jew stuff that might be around for 20 years because Dean's show going to be around for 20 years. And I said, well, let me think about it. So he goes back upstairs and I wave to the audience and they wave to me and I have all of their sympathy. Poor guy's act is stopped and he has to. So I walk around and it doesn't take me a minute. I'm going back and forth, waving at the audience. So then I say, Greg, I'm okay now. I'm okay. Do you want me to come up and tell it to you? He said, do you swear? And I said, no. He said, is anybody going to sue us? And I said, no. He said, okay, get back on your mark. And now the audience is chuckling. So when the camera's on me and it's rolling, I'm very slow and very peaceful and very calm because I'm so sure of this joke. And I'm looking at the audience and I said, have you all noticed in the paper recently that President Johnson's daughter is engaged? And they said, oh, no. And do you notice who she's engaged to? This very prominent, young, handsome Air Force pilot. Well, when they nod again, and I'm sure that Garrison's thinking, where's this? How can this be a joke, for God's sake? And I said, do you know that the Supreme Court Justice, the head Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Earl Warren, called President Johnson and said he would like to officiate at this wedding? Or when they chuckle and some of them applaud and they nod. And I said, but what you don't hear is what President Johnson said back to Earl Warren. Now they're all chuckling. I said, well, I'm going to tell you what he said. He said, you're not going to do that, Earl, because I'm going to tell you. After that Warren Commission report, I don't want to look back in 30 years and find out my daughter ain't married. Well, there was the hugest applause I had ever heard in my life in the studio audience. Some people stood and applauded. And I thought, God, I've tapped into something I didn't know existed, that Americans did not believe their own government. And they were afraid to say anything. And there you got that renegade Canadian thing. So anyway, down the stairs comes Greg Garrison, and he's with Guy in a Blue Suit. This is a guy from Standards and Practices. And the guy looks at me and he says, you're not doing that joke. And I said, hey, hold it a minute. I'm not saying that Lee Harvey Oswald did not shoot John Kennedy. He said, I don't care what you're saying. This network supports the Warren report, and we are not going to do anything to denigrate the Warren report. And that's it. And a lot of the people said boo in the stands. They said boo. And then Greg sort of looked at me and waved, said, I'm sort of. And then he went back upstairs. And then he turned to the audience and he turned to me and he said very loudly, okay, John, back to the Jew stuff, but come and see me afterwards. So I do the Jewish Scott stuff. And I go upstairs afterwards and guess what I'm thinking? Guess.
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking he's going to offer me a job as a host of a show because I'm really good at what it was I did. And I can think on my feet, okay? And he had the power to do it. And maybe it'd be a summer replacement for Dean, for God's sake. I go in and I sit down and this is what happens. He says, John, he said, my favorite women are brunettes. That's the first thing he says. And I said, yes. And he said, every one of the ones that I really loved was Mexican. Now I knew what he was getting at. My wife, Sarita, was drop dead beautiful brunette Mexican. And he says to me, would you mind if I asked your wife out? And I said, Greg, let me ask you a question. You have a reputation for being a very successful humper. And you don't ask husbands' permissions. You just go off with them somewhere to a hotel or a motel and you hump away, okay? Without asking the husbands.
Is this
I
always on Wednesdays or?
Yeah, that's funny. I said, so you're asking the wrong person when you ask me. He said, why am I asking the wrong person? I said, I can't give my wife permission to go out and hump you, for God's sake. She's got to do that on her own. So, and he said, you don't mind if I ask her? I said,
In case you're just tuning in, folks, we're talking about camels.
that is, you should have been a comedian. Your father's right. So anyway, listen, not only do I give you permission, she's downstairs now. I'll leave the office and send her up to you. And he said, well, you don't have to do that, but it won't bother you. I said, not in the least, but the answer may bother you. And I walk out. And then I stop. And I said, Greg, do you think you're more appealing than Frank Sinatra? He said, why are you saying that? Well, I have been a witness to twice Mr. Sinatra hitting really hard on my wife and being rebuffed immediately before she was married to me and after she was married to me. So if you think you can outdo Francis, you be my guest. He never asked her. But I never got to do the Dean Martin show again until Red Fox got to be roasted. Now I'm going to have to use the N-word again. I don't want to use it again, but it's a great story about Red Fox. So I'm going to tell you my most embarrassing moment as a host. How long have we been talking?
Now you ask? Why do we have to put another quarter in the meter?
Oh my God.
Are you double parked?
Hey,
do you need the men's room?
It can't be
an hour and 45 minutes.
We couldn't.
But
what?
The one who went the longest is actor Scott Schwartz. He went. Now this was during the pandemic. Okay. When, there's a lot to talk about. And he was in his backyard, in his home there in LA, and everything was shut. All the Comic Cons and autograph shows and everything were done. And he, of course, he was in A Christmas Story, and he was in The Toy with Jackie Gleason and Richard Pryor. So he's East Coast. He's originally from New Jersey. We had a conversation. He really opened up about his life. 6 hours. Uninterrupted. No breaks, no pausing. It's the topper. Yeah, it's the topper. So no worries, John. No worry. You had the fear of God there. Do I have to fill another 4 hours?
No. Listen.
No, this is phenomenal. This is like classic, legendary stuff.
I'll do 15 more minutes with you, only if you promise to bring me back in maybe 6 or 8 weeks. It'll be after my third film opens. That's about fantastic. John Kennedy and Jim. It's called John Barbour's and William Shakespeare's last word on the murder of JFK. Opens at the Town Center 5 Theater in Encino. And one of the reasons it's so wonderfully told and crafted is I tell 2 stories. One is my 53 years of trying to tell Mr. Garrison's story, while at the same time trying to tell my story about trying to survive as an entertainer and a father and a husband in show business in America. It is, and the ending of my son is the one of the executive producers of Criminal Minds.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Great show.
Oh, absolutely great show. And he's one of 3 geniuses I've ever met. The first is Jim Garrison, and then my son, and then Buckminster Fuller, who was the genius who invented the geodesic dome. And I met him on my morning show. So I want to tell you about, I guess, my most shameful moment as a host in television. So, are you ready for this? Are you ready for this?
We are ready for this.
Okay.
Put a pot of coffee on, folks. He's about to open up.
It was 1970. I was doing the AM show, and the general manager of the station, John McMahon, who used to wear $700 empty suits, never wanted me to do movie reviews on television. I was the first to do them. He said, nobody gives a crap about movies. It's all television. But it was live, and I did them anyway. And the other thing that I did is I opened up phones, because I said, I found that more people who were on a phone ask questions that are sometimes better than the host. And he looked at me and he said, well, why the F did we hire you? And I said, well, hopefully in a couple of weeks you'll find out, and give the producer a raise who hired me. So we had Muhammad Ali on the air when the only two people who would put him on the air was Howard Cosell and Jack Paar. And I had him on for 90 minutes. And the next day he did Flip Wilson's show. And I wrote the introduction for him for the Flip Wilson show. And I'll tell you something, this is not embarrassing. This is surprising to me, because I asked him, obviously, who his idols were. Now, if you're talking to this young boxer who was really talented boxer, really bright, who his idols were, who do you think he would talk about?
You would think other boxers.
Yeah, that's right. Sugar Ray Robinson.
Joe Louis.
Yeah, Joe Louis. Or even intellectual blacks like Douglas. There's so many intellectual blacks and guess who his idol was? Gorgeous George.
Really?
Tell the folks who Gorgeous George was,
It was an animated character.
No, Gorgeous George was the most successful and hated wrestler in America.
Oh, yes. Yeah, there was a book and cartoon series, right? That's
right. And he used to dress like Liberace and the Pope.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he said, that was my idol.
Wow.
And I said, how could
realize that?
Nobody realized it. And I said, well, how on that earth could that mean man be your idol? He said, because the more he cussed at the audience, the more asses he put in the seats to see him fail. And so the more I say how beautiful I am and how ugly every other fighter is, the more they're going to want to see me fail, but the more they're going to see me float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. I mean, he was wonderful. Now, the terrible thing was that myself and John McMahon never got along. And his news director, Irv was his name. He was a novel writer, and his last name was Irving. And he tried to get Mr. McMahon to get me to do the reviews Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, because he thought that would increase the ratings. And he said no. And I got fired. I have to tell you how I got fired before I get to my shameful story. I accidentally booked Jim Garrison when I went into a bookstore. And I accidentally picked up a book called Heritage of Stone. The author was Jim Garrison. I stood there, Jim, for 4 hours reading stuff that I'd never heard in the mainstream news, that he had to sue Time Life to get the Zapruder film to show a jury. There was a forensic pathologist named Fink who was called in defense of Clay Shaw about the autopsy. And in cross-examination, Fink said there was no autopsy. Curtis LeMay, the guy general, stopped it all. And all this kind of stuff you never read about. So the next day, I call New Orleans information, get the number. I dial the number, and this bass baritone answers the phone. Says, hello. And I said, could I speak to Mr. Garrison, please? All excited. He said, this is he. And I said, oh, Mr. Garrison, this is John Barbour in Los Angeles. I just finished reading your book, Heritage of Stone. And what I'd like, he started to chuckle. He said, oh, you must be the other one, John. I only sold 2 copies when it actually was a bestseller. And so I said, we're doing this hour-and-a-half show, and I would love to have you on for the first half hour. And there will be thousands of people lining up at the phone to talk to you, and I would like you to come and do it. And he said, well, you're not going to get away with it. And I said, what do you mean I'm not going to get away with it? He said, have you ever seen me on late night television or any television unhindered? And I said, yes, it happened one time. I said, when they tried to bribe, Perry Raymond Russo was his key witness. And Perry Raymond Russo was contacted by a member of the CIA and the FBI who was a producer at NBC News and asked where he would like to live in America. And he said, well, I'd like to live in California, actually. And he said, what kind of job would you like? And he said, well, I'm a cab driver, but I would like to be in insurance or something. And they said, you have a job in Los Angeles for $50,000 a year if you will leave the jurisdiction of Jim Garrison. So Perry calls Mr. Garrison and said, should I meet with him? And Mr. Garrison said, Jim, Perry, you do what you want, but would you wear a wire? So he said, certainly. So this guy from NBC goes down there, offers him the $50,000. It's the most blatant piece of criminal interruption into the most famous crime committed in American history, where the government murders their own president and the media supports all the killers before and after. And so there was a fairness doctrine, as I mentioned to you earlier. So Jim files lawsuit and they give him a half an hour late night. Some of it is in my second film, but you can Google it, Jim Garrison late night on NBC, in which he stands at a blackboard and proves that the CIA murdered the president of the United States. So, but anyway, we talk a lot, and we talk a lot about Shakespeare, because the titles in his book were all quotes from Shakespeare. And he softens and he agrees to do the show. He said, John, it's 4 years after the Warren Report. He said, do you know, Harris Poll just did a poll, interesting that you should call, this week. 82% of all Americans do not believe Oswald acted alone, or maybe did it at all. And I said, if that's the case, if so many Americans feel that way, why aren't they storming these barricades of bullshit and dragging them out on the streets and hanging them? And he chuckled and he said, well, you didn't see the second question in the survey. And I said, well, what is that? He said, the second question was tougher, and it said to the people, would you like to see a deeper, more intense investigation into the murder of John Kennedy, where FBI and CIA are not hired, but instead questioned? And then Jim says, what do you think the percentage was there? And I said, I have no idea. It must have been high. He said it was 22%. I said, are you kidding? Are you kidding? And so Mr. Garrison says, John, what does that say to you about the American people? I said, Mr. Garrison, I don't know what it says to the American people, but I know what it says to me as a street kid. I know what my mother and father did in the rumble seat of the car, or on the pool table, or in the bedroom to conceive me. But don't ever tell me that my mother's not a virgin. And that's where the title of the book came from. And he said, oh, God. He said, John, you sound like my second favorite writer, Mark Twain. He said, you know what Mark Twain said 100 years ago? And I said, no, what? He said about the media, if you do not read America's newspapers, you are misinformed. But if you do read them, you're uninformed. That was 100 years old. So I did the show, and I was fired immediately. Now, the upshot of this is twofold. I got 2 weeks' notice. And a woman whose life I had saved on the phone, she called, she was going to commit suicide.
Mm.
And she considered me her best friend and wanted to say goodbye to me. I had her on the phone for half an hour. Southern California stopped the 2 men to listen to us talking about the fact she wanted to kill herself and join her lover. And I said, well, why would you call and depress your best friend? So she chuckled a little. Anyway, I eventually talked her out of it. She joins a bunch of women's groups and becomes happy and successful and meets another dancer, male dancer, in her 70s. Anyway, I announced that I'm being fired and being replaced. Well, she went around with these women's clubs that she got and gathered 5,000 signatures on a petition. And we had hundreds of letters, and they brought in and put in John McMahon's desk. So I went to see John. And now he always wanted me to call him Mr. McMahon, but now that I'm being fired, screw him, I'll call him John. So I reduced him to my level. So I said, John, I know you don't like me, even though I'm really successful. I'm better in front of a camera than you are behind a desk. That's how the conversations. And I said, if you were as good as behind a desk as I am in front of a camera, it would you who'd be president of ABC and not Elton Rule. Elton Rule became a really big fan of mine. So I said, listen, why don't you let me do the reviews on your news Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so people you'll have a bigger audience, obviously, but people won't think you hate me. His exact words.
Mm.
Fuck the people, they don't hire you. I do, and you're finished. And that was it. So anyway, at one point,
I think you should write a book, another one, and the title should be I'm Not Finished.
Oh, God, okay. So, do we have 4 minutes for this story?
Oh, yeah, this time, because I wanted to ask you really quickly about Tim Conway and George Burns.
Oh, I could tell you a George Burns story that is so phenomenal. It's how Lucille Ball got to own her own show. But listen, I don't want to go over 2 hours, okay? And I've already gone over 2 hours. And oh my God, I have never had so much fun doing an interview, and I've literally done thousands of them, because you have the 2 most perfect ingredients for being a talk show host. You are both in yourself interesting, and above that, you're interested. That's the perfect conversation. Anyway, so in any event, McMahon hated me so much. When we would have people like Ali on the show and Jane Fonda fighting against the war in Vietnam, and Bob Irvine in the news department would on a clip from the show to put on the news. And McMahon wouldn't let him even promote one of his own shows. And so when I would interview these people, there'd be 30 or 40 people from the New York Times, the Christian Science Monitor, Time Newsweek, all over the studio. And they would take them out on the alleyway and against a brick wall, interview them, and not ask questions as good as I did, quite frankly. And one day, we get a call from Cesar Chavez, and he wants to come on the show. And this is why he wants to come on the show. The only reason I got the show is because 20,000 Chicanos were protesting the license of ABC. And I auditioned against 40 people, half of them who were Chicano newsmen, and very capable as newsmen, but they were only good readers. And I was picked by the producer, Brad Lockman, because I could think and talk on my feet and think and talk sitting down. So I got the job. Anyway, the reason that Cesar Chavez called the show is at one of the major rallies after ABC had secured the license, they were still petitioning. And there was a 20,000 person Chicano moratorium march on City Hall to protest not being represented not only on television, but in city government and in the school system and everything like that. The greatest Chicano writer in America, his name was Ruben Salazar, used to write for the Los Angeles Magazine. What a writer, what a writer. Anyway, he was one of the attendees at this march. And it was put together by two young men in their 20s, Gonzalo Javier and Rosalia Munoz. I haven't mentioned those names since 1970. How is it I can remember all this stuff? Because it was so.
It had an impact on you,
It
yeah.
had an emotional impact, not an intellectual, but an emotional.
Emotional.
Anyway, riots are started. Now, to me, I think the riots are started by the police for the reasons of being able to fire tear gas canisters at all these Mexicans or arrest her and shoot them. That's just an opinion, but I think it was true. One of these tear gas canisters hit and killed Ruben Salazar, killed him on the spot. And his dropping to the sidewalk stopped the riots because everyone there wanted to gather around the body of Ruben Salazar, okay? Anyway, a guy named Corky Gonzalez is arrested as the guy who starts the riots. And his chief character witness is Cesar Chavez. So Cesar's coming to be the character witness, and he gets on the phone and he calls, John, could I come in and be on your show? Now, at that time, Cesar Chavez was as famous as Bobby Kennedy, because Bobby Kennedy made him famous, okay? And so, anyway, he gets on the show, and there you had 20 or 30 people around from Washington Post and New York Times. Everybody imaginable wants to get Cesar Chavez. And he came in with this plaid shirt, and he came in with these Levi's, beautiful brown eyes, nice olive skin, and a very, very sweet soul. Now, when it's time to end the review, I'm getting embarrassed because I'm having this horrible thought. I have to ask him a favor. So I said to him, Mr. Chavez, could I ask you a favor, please? And he doesn't even look at me. And I know in a few minutes, it's all going to be over. They're going to push me aside and they're going to drag him outside. And he doesn't answer. Now I'm embarrassed. Oh, God, what have I just done? What an egomaniac have I? And I repeated, could I please ask you a very, very big favor? So he just looks at me. He doesn't even say yes. I said, this is a very successful show. And I hate to tell you this, but I've done. I'm the one responsible, myself and the producer. And look at the people we bring on, Muhammad Ali, Jane Fonda, and yourself. And I say, and our general manager will not let them take a clip and put it on the news to promote the show. And so these people here are going to drag you outside and put you up against a brick wall. And they're going to ask you questions that maybe were not as good as my questions. And I'm not going to be an egomaniac about that. But I'm telling you, I'm very ashamed of myself because I feel like a Hollywood jerk. But if they come and ask you, to come out to do an interview, would you please say to them, you have a bad back from picking grapes? And I wanted to cry. I was so literally ashamed of myself. So then the director says, okay, that's it. It's a wrap. And before I knew it, they grabbed my chair and they pulled me off. And they're reaching for Cesar Chavez. And they're grabbing at him. And he puts up his palm like that, like the Pope. And they all stop. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, I deeply, deeply appreciate you all being here. And I would love to talk to each and every one of you. And I will try to do that, but I can't do that right now because I have to do it another time because I have a very bad back from picking grapes. And after that, they had to show my clip on television and it doubled the ratings. So, and I got 1,000 stories like that. We'll never get to it, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back because I think with the bells ringing and the voices, I think your dinner's ready.
It's my wife, Sarita, and she's so adorable. She may think I've dropped dead.
she's calling. She's saying, "Are you okay?"
Yeah. So
see, that's what we do. We just let it roll. You're on for
oh my God.
if you only had 20 minutes, you had a 30 minutes, you had an hour, 2 hours. How we just let it roll. We don't cut the guests off. The viewers, they're following along and they're absolutely loving it. The comments that have been coming in.
Really? You can read the comments?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Coming in from Canada, from Ontario, one of our JMS Lovity viewers. This has been one of the best conversations.
Conversations.
That's how, yeah, we don't say interviews, we say conversations.
Okay.
Because
first of all, if you don't have a copy of this book, you send me your address, Jim.
Yes.
And is your father still alive?
Yeah, everybody's there. Yeah.
Okay. He would probably love this more than you because, he's around my age. I will autograph it to both of you, send you each a copy, and you can get it on Amazon, anybody else. And it's all 5-star reviews. And the reason it did not become a bestseller is because the New York Times and Wall Street Journal won't touch anything that supports Jim Garrison. Now, if you want the most magnificent moment watching a documentary, you spend $2, go to Amazon again, and order The American Media and the Second Assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and you will be totally, totally blown away and will never have a fraction of a doubt in your mind ever again that Jim Garrison not only won the case, he is more important in history than even John Kennedy.
That's absolutely incredible. It really, really is. You've been very fascinated by that subject matter, that topic, huh? We dug in deep.
Well, I'm a storyteller, and there's no greater story than that story. But I didn't want to get involved. Look at what it cost me. It cost me the greatest morning show in America, and it cost me the most successful television show in history, which is Real People. But I still managed to get a lot of work, an awful lot of work. And I think I told you I had a pilot that was going to go on Fox, and it was co-hosted by Greg Kinnear. He and I were hosting the show.
That's right.
Anyway, Jim, I'm so overwhelmed. First of all, I was left speechless. Here I've talked for 2 hours and 50 minutes, and I'm telling you I'm speechless because of that incredible opening and introduction. You have no idea.
Well, I certainly hope that anything beyond the introduction was worthy as well.
Hey, listen, you have no idea how much it's restored my faith maybe in America, because I have lost all faith in America ever. Ever. In Canada, I got a note from one guy in Canada. He said, up here in Canada, we think we are living above a meth lab. Is that hilarious? Okay, go away. I just go away so I can go find out.
That's it. Here is John's website. There you go, right there, gang. So you can check everything out there. Congratulations on everything, John, thus far in your extraordinary, epic life and career. And we're going to have you back. Definitely, we can dig in a little bit deeper and much, much more we can talk about. Let folks know, too, on November 22nd, the Town Center 5 Theater, screening his third docu-presentation, John Barbour and William Shakespeare's Last Word on the Murder of JFK. It's 1 to 3 and 7:30. It's Ventura Boulevard, Encino, the Town Center 5 Theater.
And what you have to do, you have to send me your address, and also you make notes about Lucille Ball, George Burns,
Tim Conway.
Make notes like that.
I will.
I have stories that have never been told.
Well, as I always say to all the guests, my friend, we will keep the porch light on for you. I hope you enjoyed the show with me as much as I have with you, and the show met whatever expectations that you had.
Oh my God, they went beyond them, believe me, because I didn't know what I was going to say.
That's it.
That's how spontaneous you are. So thank you again. And if I were religious, I'd say God bless. But anyway.
You know, I just got to say quick before we go, I laughed because you said in the beginning that the introduction, the open was kind of like a little bit like an obituary of sorts. Rhoda Lee was just on about a week ago, and she said something similar, and I clicked into what you said. She said, "Oh my God, that was the best damn obituary I've ever had. If and when that time comes, I hope you recorded it because I want you to say the same thing."
I said the same thing as Rhoda. Great.
Yes,
minds.
you did.
Great minds. Okay.
You be well, John Barbour. Thanks for stopping by the Jim Masters Show. Spread the word about our series. We would love that. And we're going to keep the light on. You're welcome back.
Oh,
anytime.
I will. Listen, when I get the link, I will post it. And I have the maximum of 5,000 friends, but I have a lot of friends who would love to post it on their Facebook page.
And maybe some of them would like to pop on the show as guests too. Spread the word. Love to have them.
I can think of a couple of people whom you would love who are mockers in show business.
Fantastic. Okay. Go have dinner now before it gets cold.
Oh, it is cold.
That's it.
I'll have to thaw it now.
Take care, my friend. A pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jim.
You're welcome. Incredible conversation, huh? We're talking with John Barbour, a television legend of many, 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 many years and many, many, many talents. What an extraordinary conversation this was. If you missed any of it, it's all archived on our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. The YouTube channel is Jim Masters TV. Multi-Emmy winning TV legend, creator of the very first reality series on television. It was on NBC, Real People. Probably remember that. And boy, the stories that he had about Frank Sinatra and Jack Parr and The Great Gatsby. There is, of course, Robert Redford. I mean, I let the guests roll. We generally thought we'd be chatting for about an hour, but he had so many great stories he obviously wanted to share with us. You know, no need to cut somebody off if they have the time. Dean Martin stories, incredible. JFK stories, extraordinary stories. Even talked about Merv Griffin and, you know, when he had time involved with Griffin. He talked about another television legend, Tom Snyder. And when we have him back, we'll talk about, he's got stories about Tim Conway and George Burns and so many others. Of course, the incomparable Richard Pryor as well. And there's Gorgeous George he was talking about. There he is. And, you know, I was thinking of Curious George. that's the animated the comic book and cartoon series, not Gorgeous George. I'm in an animated mood today, I guess. There's Gorgeous George, a legend right there, of course, in the sports world. But just the incredible stories he just was sharing in a very open, authentic, raw, and real way. That's why it's called Real People, the series. But just in a way that was just really, it went beyond my expectations. I really, really appreciate the extraordinary comments he made as far as our show, our series, and some of my work. Again, he's a legend in the industry as a host, a broadcaster, and radio and television, film, and all of it. So to have words like that from, you know, an iconic person in the industry at different levels, on camera, behind the scenes, producer, all of it, really has touched me and moved me in many different ways. So I really appreciate his observations. And there is the book, gang. Your Mother's Not a Virgin. And what's wonderful is now you know the derivation of the title. You know how the title came about. And it's on Amazon.com. His website as well, John Barbour's World, gmail.com. And yeah, this is really a cool conversation. And here's that. He talked about Red Fox a little bit too. Happy birthday, Red Fox. And he does, I guess I mentioned, or if you joined us late, he does speaking engagements and all kinds of motivational speaking, things of that nature as well. There he is with the Superman. There's a trifecta of photos. This is the room that he was just in as well, with the Superman shirt. John Barbour. He's been around a long time, and he wanted to be on our show, and we were very pleased to have him here. Gang, listen to this. If you love this kind of material, these iconic people in television and film and music and stage and just life, I want to show you something. This is really extraordinary. On Monday, this Monday, we have an unbelievable cast of special guests, all who are well-known, revered veterans of the industry, who are incredibly popular and beloved, and they're all coming on the Jim Masters show this Monday at the same time. Who are these epic people? You know their names. You've seen them on television and movies and so much more. Coming up this Monday, the incomparable, extraordinary, acclaimed actress Mariette Hartley is going to be on the Jim Masters show, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific this Monday. Then, with Mariette Hartley, her husband, Jerry Sraka, who is an extraordinary, revered, celebrated actor as well. Another acclaimed veteran actor, television, film, comedy, everything, Stuart Pankin. Another incredible, iconic actor, Peter MacNicol, is with us. And also Peter Onorati. They are all on major television series. Peter MacNicol was on Ally McBeal. And Mindy Sterling, another one who's going to be with us. Shroka. All of these folks are going to be with us. We're going to be also talking about a beautiful film that Mariette Hartley and her husband Jerry star in. And it's a loving, wonderful film, our almost completely true love story. And it's just out now. And all of these epic, well-known, very popular on-camera performers, these fabulous actors and actresses, are going to be with us on a very special show this Monday. Don't miss it. And then take a look who's with us the day after. John Tesh. Yes, the incredible multi-Emmy winning, Grammy-nominated pianist, musician, composer. Of course, he does that incredible radio series in over 400 stations syndicated, Intelligence for Your Life. He does it with his lovely wife, legendary actress Connie Selica. And he's an epic radio show host, television host as well. He co-hosted Entertainment Tonight with Mary Hart and also Lisa Gibbons. Of course, you know Entertainment Tonight. He's one of the original hosts. He has done PBS specials. He has countless CDs of phenomenal music, pop, as well as classical and Christian contemporary or contemporary Christian. He sold millions of albums, Emmy-winning, Grammy-nominated. He has been a television news anchor on several television stations, including Channel 2 in New York, WCBS Television. He's won all kinds of journalism awards, as well as awards for music and entertainment and everything. This is really exciting. Now, what's extra exciting about this gang, and he's all excited to be here, and I'm excited to have him here. He's also getting ready to start his Christmas tour. Yeah, he's starting his Christmas tour around the country, which I think is really fantastic. We're going to go check him out as well. He's got his Christmas tour, Jazzy Christmas, and then he also has another concert tour that's coming up right after the Christmas tour with his full band. And again, everybody knows John Tesh, and Again, you hear him all the time on the radio in his syndicated series. You've seen him for years on television. Sells out concert venues with his fabulous music. He's with us on Tuesday, which is absolutely amazing. I interviewed him a number of years back on PBS for the PBS concert special he did at Red Rocks in Colorado, which was epic. And we also did a little piece for a New York television station I was reporting news for. I was the bureau chief and correspondent for a television station that's now owned by CBS in the New York suburbs. And it was WLNY TV, and still is. And yeah, it's just really incredible. So he's popping on the show Tuesday. John Tesh. Isn't that amazing? And before that, on Monday, Mariette Hartley. Remember her in the Polaroid commercials with Jim Rockford from the Rockford Files, James Garner? Yeah. She also, believe it or not, was one of the hosts of the morning program on CBS with Rollins Smith, and Bob Saget was on that show as well. And Mark McEwen was the weatherman. That was in the 80s. That was from CBS News, CBS Television Broadcast Center in New York. She did that. She's done countless movies, Mariette Hartley. So she and her husband are in a brand new, beautiful, touching movie together. And all of these fabulous folks, these incomparable actors and actresses, are going to be with us this Monday. And John Tesh is going to be with us on Tuesday. And that's just a short list of folks. If you didn't see Allison Arngrim from Little House on the Prairie on, she was on recently. If you didn't see May Pang, who had the 18-month relationship with John Lennon, she was on recently. Ruta Lee was on with us recently. And so many, many, many guests from all different backgrounds and television, film, music, stage, food, sports, comedy. Did you see the episode where Chef Jacques Pepin, the incomparable French chef Jacques Pepin, was with us? That episode is there as well. Did you see the episode when the co-owner and executive chef of Patsy's Italian Restaurant, Sal, was with us just a couple of days ago? Amazing stories about all the celebrities who have gone there. Liza Minnelli, Frank Sinatra loved it. I mean, epic people who have been to Patsy's. I've been to Patsy's. We're going to be going there probably again real soon. So really amazing. But again, if you want to check out John Barbour's book, let's pull that up again. There she is. And it's available on Amazon, and it's available again at his website. You can learn more, johnbarbersworld.com. Epic, epic time. Now, I haven't eaten dinner yet, and it's 9:30 at night, or is it 8:30? 9:30, I believe. Yeah, 9:30. Yeah, that's right. 9:30, because we started the show at 7. Wow, I got to eat. I've got a big meatball. In this area, they call it a grinder. And other areas, they say sandwich. Some people say submarine. Some people say hoagie. Some people say hero. It's a big meatball, and I can't wait to eat it. It's been a busy, busy, busy day. And I have a television shoot tomorrow morning, so I was writing scripts all day, and we got to get up early for that. You know what? It's always a heck of a lot of fun sharing this time with all of you on the Jim Masters Show. Thanks for popping by. Thanks for hopping in. Thanks for staying with us. Thanks for all the levity, as we call it, and all of the comments and all of the tweets. If you want to follow me on social media, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, which is now X, all at Jim Masters TV. All of those places. Come say hi, like, follow. Welcome everybody who's done that. And also, as far as this series, the Jim Masters Show Live, Entertainment Lifestyle Celebrity Talk Show series, we have hundreds and hundreds of episodes you can binge watch in the archives at Jim Masters TV. Well over 1,000+ episodes so far, which is incredible. And if you enjoyed this really extraordinary episode with TV legend John Barbour, give it a like. Please do give it a thumbs up like on our YouTube channel. That allows more people to see it when you do that. Leave a comment in the comments section. There's a comment section under the episode. Drop a comment. Interact with us. Share the episode and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV, which costs nothing. Don't forget to click that notification bell icon so you get alerts about all the great episodes and all the upcoming celebrity friends and guests and special episodes and all the cool things that we're working hard behind the scenes here to prepare for all of you, wherever you're watching around the world, whatever the time zone is. It's so cool to have you here. So give it a like, thumbs up, drop a comment. That helps us. When you do those things, this platform, YouTube, loves it, and they allow more people to see these episodes. When you simply click like, you subscribe, you leave a comment, more of the folks around the world get to see this show that you enjoy so much, the Jim Masters Show live series. So that helps us out, and we would really appreciate doing that. If you have, thank you so much. That is very kind of you to do that as well. So we are going to put a bow on this episode, but you can binge watch. There are many other episodes coming up. And you like Chef Sal's food. Yes, at Patsy's in New York City. Yes. And Lynn Logan is here. Lynn Logan says a great interview. Lynn Logan, thank you very much. Remember, she's a dear friend of our show. She does a phenomenal Reba McEntire. Yes, I was just chatting with Lynn this week. She loved being on our show. We loved having Lynn here. She was here from just outside Houston. There was tornado warnings and everything, but she was where she is, there was tornado warnings in Texas, but she was a trooper, and her grandkids were on. And her husband was in the recliner chair. If you didn't see, and she did Reba. If you didn't see that episode, you can see that as well. Don't forget, you can support the series with super chat, super emoji, super stickers in the chat section when the show is on live, or anytime. There's a super thanks heart icon under all the episodes. You click that. That helps support what we are doing here on the show. I'll check a couple of quick comments here before we have that big meatball sandwich is waiting. Gonna have to reheat it. Got it like 3 hours ago. It was brought here. Thank you, Jim, for always bringing the very best guests to Liberty Hall. You the best. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. From Maureen and Kathleen in New York City. Thanks for all you do, Jim. Have a great night. Hugs, you too, and cheers. Absolutely. Thank you very much as well. And everybody that's watching from all around the world. John Barbour's memory is awesome. Absolutely. He was really pulling a lot of nuggets out. Yes. Maureen says John Tesh's music is absolutely beautiful. It is. I have all the material, and he's going to be with us on Tuesday. Good stuff. Good stuff. And I wanted you to show John your George Burns thing. That's Leo. That is Leo. Leo, True Frost. Leo is a big fan of our show, a big supporter of our show. And as I mentioned the other night, we gave him a big happy birthday because he turned 15 years old. And he's all excited and he's all happy, and so are we. And he's one of our great friends and supporters and viewers. And he contacts me all the time, and we write back and forth. He's such a sweetheart of a guy. And he's 15, and it was his birthday. When we have him back, we will talk about George Burns, and I'll have the George Burns doll here, and maybe even the genie bottle and the Gilligan and the Don Full of Love and all the rest. Good to see you, and I hope you're still enjoying your birthday, Leo. Yes. Wonderful show tonight. Jim, loved the conversation and John's humor. What a hoot. I know he went in so many incredible directions, right? He really was very revealing and intriguing and engaging, and I couldn't believe some of the stuff that he shared, right? So I just let the guests roll, and I interact. Obviously, it's called the Jim Masters Show. Somebody said one time, why do you talk during the conversation? I'm like, why do I talk during the conversation? Number one, it's called the Jim Masters Show. Number two, I'm a host, conversationalist. These aren't interviews; these are conversations. So I speak and they speak, and we have a back and forth, and it's a different kind of thing. And And the person said, "Oh, okay." And that was that. Some people, that's interesting to put it that way. Thank you very much, Austin. Another wonderful show. Please subscribe for great content. I agree. Thank you very much. But yeah, these are conversations. I love to have conversations with the guests and with the viewers as well. Merlin in Canada saying this has been one of the best conversations. Thank you very much. I like the word conversation. And of course, John loves seeing the word conversation as well. So good stuff. And you were also happy that he was on our show. Kathleen as well. I keep wanting to say Kathy because I have a cousin, Kathy. Maybe I get to call her Kathy. Thank you very much. I appreciate all that. Got to scoot off and have that big sandwich before we go. And you guys are great. All right. So interact with us. Drop us a note. Leave a comment in the comment section. Give us a thumbs up, a like. Share it on your social media. Come see me at Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Jim Masters TV. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV, and much more coming your way right here on the Jim Masters Show Live series. All right. For the 40th time, I'm going to have that sandwich because I don't want to eat too late because I got to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning tomorrow to get ready for a television shoot. Working the weekend warrior. I've done that for years in television radio, so it's nothing new. We love you guys. Thanks for being with us. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Let us know. And thanks to all those who have commented in the Lovely Hole chat room. We appreciate that as well. That means the world to us. Everything you do means the world to us. I wouldn't want it to be just me chatting at you. I love doing it with you. So we'll see you again soon, okay? And binge watch, go back in time, check out anything you might have missed or something you want to see again. You can certainly do all that. And we'll do it again. We'll say, come see us again here on the Jim Masters Show Live series. All right, we're going to cue up the Jim Masters Singers and Orchestra. Jen Barry in Pennsylvania always loves our theme music. Obviously, John Barbour loves our introduction. So we're going to play it out right now with our theme music and come see us again on the Jim Masters Show Live. We'll be waiting for you. Keep the porch light on for you as well. Thanks for your time. And we value that greatly. And we'll see you on the next episode. Be well. Love one another. Take care of one another. And don't forget to love yourself. Jim Masters, thanking you for your time this time. Till next time. Be well. And cheers.